When you look at the badge, what do you see? Do you see honesty and integrity? Or do you see brutality and disdain? And regardless of how you answer that question, whether you're an officer or a resident, the idea that I plan to share with you tonight hopefully gives you a different perspective of what's possible through law enforcement. You see, I'm a social worker that runs a police agency. I'm the director at the Sheriff's office, and oftentimes when I say that, I get a strange look and people say, well, how'd that happen? And really what I get to do is connect those two every day to create change within individuals, but also change within various neighborhoods within our community. I mean, think about it. As a young social worker, I started out working at Ozone House, working with homeless teenagers. It was not uncommon at all for an officer to find a runaway or pick up a homeless kid off the street, knock on our door and bring them and connect them to services. Or what about the mom who's just been abused and we respond to the domestic violence call? We arrive to find her battered and bruised. And it's not uncommon for us to be the connection to Safe House. Or even the call we get about someone who's loitering downtown. We arrive and find out that that man is homeless. It's frigid outside in the winter, and we sometimes are the first connection to the shelter. So imagine if we use that connection to not only focus on arresting people and solving crimes, but if we also used it to focus on understanding the problem and addressing the root causes. I think there's a fundamental problem with only focusing on crime, and that is that a crime has to have been committed, someone has to have been victimized before I take action. Why not understand the root cause of that crime and hopefully prevent it from ever happening again? And so I give you an example. In one of our downtown areas, we had a huge problem with prostitution. We'd get business owners and family members complaining. We'd put a sting together. We'd make some arrests, focus on the crime. We'd push that problem to the city. The city would get the same complaints. They'd make some arrests. They'd put a sting together, and they'd push it right back to us. Never focusing on the problem, but always focusing on the crime, we pushed it back and forth between one another. Until one day, one officer, she's undercover as a prostitute for one of our stings. She's trained, she has backup, she has her gun, and yet she's fearful. And she asked herself the question, what would make a woman do this? And in asking that one simple question, she went from focusing on arresting someone to trying to understand the actual problem. And so she began to ask the women, where you come from? Why are you here? What do you do? Why do you do what you do? And over the years, what we found is every single one of them was an addict. And us simply arresting them and putting them in jail had nothing to do with solving the real problem. And so this officer, yes, we still do stings to this day. But before anyone ever set foot in the jail, those women go into a room with a group of social workers where they get an assessment. That assessment is turned into a bond recommendation that goes to the judge. The judge uses that to sentence the women. And while they're in jail, they're actually getting services. That is the difference when you focus on addressing root cause problems versus just on arresting people. One officer, one question, changed the way we deal with prostitution and addiction in our community. Now, when those women get out of jail, they have an opportunity and a choice. They can go back to the neighborhood and do what they were doing before. They're free. Or they can go to the Home of New Vision, which has beds set aside just for the women coming out of our program to focus on and deal with addiction. I'll give you another example, heroin. Heroin in Washtenaw County, just like in many places around the country, has ravaged our community. We as community members became aware of the heroin problem 2 summers ago when we had 12 overdoses in one weekend, 12 ODs in one weekend. Do you know when officers knew we had a problem? Over 4 years ago. So imagine if officers, instead of only focused on arresting people for having heroin or using heroin, if they were also asking the question of why are we seeing so much heroin in our community? And maybe, just maybe, we in the community could have wrapped ourselves around that problem before it ever became an epidemic. It's also said that in Washtenaw County, we have one of the highest rates of recidivism in the state of Michigan, meaning Someone commits a crime, we arrest them, we put them in jail. They get out, they reoffend, we rearrest, we put them back in jail. The cycle goes on and on and on. Now, some would say it's because officers in Washtenaw County do such a great job at solving crime and putting people in jail, but we would actually say why. How is it possible for someone to come into our jail 11 times? Not prison, but jail. If you've been in our jail 11 times, you're not a violent offender, or you would have already been gone to prison. So why are you here? Is it because you have mental health challenges, or you struggle with substance abuse, or you're homeless, or you struggle around educational issues, or maybe it's employment? And so one way that we actually decided to deal with this was to hire people coming out of jail and prison to work at the sheriff's office. Yes, we hire felons at the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. I can't believe it myself sometimes. But we don't hire them to sweep our floors. We don't hire them to be informants to work with detectives. We hire them to be the experts on the communities that they come from, to be street outreach workers, to use their trust, their street credibility, and their relationships to help build up the neighborhoods that they once tore down. And so there's Julia, who at 64 years old has never had a real job. Her first actual paycheck was with us at the sheriff's office. And after years of living on the streets, of prostitution, and of addiction, she came and she said, Derrick, I have two goals. I want to reconnect with my kids, and one day I want to own my own home. Two ideas that I thought sounded far-fetched at the time. But thanks to Habitat for Humanity, next month, Julia moves into her own house. We didn't give her that. She earned that. We simply connected her to her community. She began to change herself, and now she works every single day to change her neighborhood. That is the power and the difference of focusing on arresting people and understanding the actual problem. And then there's Ashton, who at 14 years old from Ann Arbor became addicted to heroin. And she was addicted for years, and now she's been clean for years. We didn't give her that. She earned it. But now she works with us to go back into the community to help those young people she used to get high with, to pull them into recovery. And then there's James, our very first outreach worker years ago. We sent him to prison for 15 years. He went to San Quentin Federal Penitentiary, no less. And now he works for us. He actually works to build up those communities that he once terrorized. He literally works to pull kids out of the gang life that once he recruited them into. I say again, that is the power of focusing on solving problems and not just on arresting people. And the day that I saw the undersheriff and James sitting in the undersheriff's office eating lunch together, talking about how to change a particular neighborhood, I realized that we had connected people in ways they had never been connected before. That we had begun to change our community in ways that we had never thought about changing before. And so I asked you again, whether you're an officer that wears the badge or a resident that fears the badge, when you see it, what do you think? Because I think about possibility, to connect people, to create change within themselves, but also within our community. Thank you.